Dr. Hussein Aidi is with us, and he has been with us now several times. He's always a good presenter for us. We're looking forward to his program tonight. He grew up in Iran. He is a 6th generation Baha'i, and his ancestors are among the first to accept the Baha'i faith. He got his doctorate in education from the University of Massachusetts. He's written several books, including one about the Harlem Prep School, of which he is a co-founder. His most recent book, one of his most recent books, is about the life of the great Tahirih and her work in girls' education. And that is his topic tonight. Welcome, Dr. Aidi.
Thank you, Jean, for a nice and short introduction. I was hoping that we don't go too far to give too much.
Oh, I've got more.
No, please don't go. It's there was occasion that I may have told the story that Ruya Khanum was in New York to make a presentation of the peace message to Secretary General of United Nations, and it happened that I was her driver. So I made arrangement for the friends in New York and New Jersey to have a meeting with her. It was a large gathering. I think over 1,000 people were in this hall. It happened that Mr. Bora Kavalan, who at the time was a member of House of Justice, he was also in New York. Helped me to prepare a nice introduction for Khanum, so I can do a justice to all her services. So he gave me some information. Then I collected information from different sources. I was so proud of myself. I went on the stage and I began to talk about her. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, because I went in detail, her parents, her father, her mother, her traveling. Finally, she got up from the chair and came. She was a bit rough lady sometimes. She came to the podium and she pushed me on the side and she said, enough is enough. Then she mentioned that the only thing Hussein has missed to tell you the name of my elementary school teachers. Trying to be funny. So the speaker's time and said so many things about them. But anyway, thank you, Jean. It's interesting that a few months ago, there was a large gathering, of course, virtual and on the Zoom, called the Parliament of World Religion. Some of you may have heard about them. This is a large gathering of all the religious organizations throughout the world that they participate, they send representatives. And it originally started in, I think it was 1893 in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. They were participating, and it was the first time that the name of the faith was mentioned there. So in this particular gathering, because I think it was virtual, many big shots were participating. The Pope gave a presentation, Dalai Lama make a presentation, Bishop Tutu, and a whole bunch of the Orthodox Church leader, I can't remember his name now. So it was quite interesting. And among all these people, I was one of the speakers. Well, of course, I brag about it, that I was on the same platform as Pope and Dalai Lama. And the subject of my presentation was the same thing that I'm sharing with you tonight. Was about the life of Tahirih and her contribution to education of the women of the East, in particular, the women of Persia. Another comment I like to make when I see all your lovely ladies, that I sincerely believe, and I say we don't have no other man in the group, that the faith of Baha'u'llah is spread in this country and run by this country mostly by women like you. They were being the backbone of American Baha'i community from very beginning. Even though sometimes the man have got the attention and got the name, but when you look at the history of the faith in America, you think of Julia Thompson, you think of Laura Gitzinger, you think of Marian Jack, you think of Elsie Austin. Some of this name I'm sure you're familiar. You think even of contemporary women like Dorothy Nelson and others. These were the really maker and shaker of this American Baha'i community. So it's so wonderful to see you all in the audience. This was not true a little over 100 years ago. The women were hardly get any recognition or had any place in public, not only in Persia, in the East, but even in America. And you all realize, and you know the history, that the first time that even a demand for the right to vote was made by Elizabeth Cady Stanton was in 1852, I think. And it took almost 70, 80 years until 1920, 21 that you ladies, women in this country got the right to vote. So the problem of the treating girls and women as an inferior gender and as second-class citizen was a common problem throughout the world in the 19th century. So the appearance of somebody like Tahirih in the East and like Sojourner Truth, for example, in America, or the founder of the Christian Science Church, or Susan Anthony and all that, these were really the heroine of the women's movement that took place in the East and West. At the time that Tahirih made her appearance in Persia, the country was run by a dynasty called Qajar dynasty. This was a family that originally came from Afghanistan. They attacked Iran and they took over the country and they established the dynasty in that country. They were quite backward group of the leaders and the kings. And then there was hardly any progress made throughout the few centuries that they were controlling the country. They sold all the interest of the country to foreign companies. They abused the population and they did not allow any progress intellectually and socially to take place in that country. Now imagine in a place like that, that even man does not have a chance of getting some education, what would be the station of women? There was hardly any attention was given to education of the girls in that place. The little education that was available for men was basically a study of Quran, reading some poetry of Hafiz or Khayyam, or knowing a little bit of grammar and maybe some mathematics. And the teacher were often the mullahs and ayatollahs and religious leaders who were, for the pay, they would set up some classes and the children of rich people would attend those classes. So it was quite interesting that in a town of Qazvin, which is a big city actually north of Tehran, Tahirih's father, who was himself a leading mullah, established a school for girls. This was probably in 1920s. 1820s, I'm sorry, in 1820s. In 1820s, and the teacher in that is two persons that were very close. One was Tahirih's mother, and one was Tahirih's grandmother. That both of them were well educated. Of course, they educate by themselves in the family setting, and they were great poet. The rate of illiteracy in that country at the time was 98% among the men and women. So establishment of this school really was a beginning of setting some educational system for the girls in the country. And I'm sure that Tahirih, born in that family of learned, he was inspired, and then throughout her life, she tried to educate and train the other women to do the same. The system in Islam, especially Shia Islam, you know, the Islam is divided to two big branches, which are mostly practiced in Persia and part of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then the Sunnis, which are majority, 90%, or in Turkey, Indonesia, and other places. And I don't want to go in detail. What happened after Prophet Muhammad died, there was a serious friction started. Some follow Imam Ali, his son-in-law. They became Shia. Those are the Persian now. And the rest of them became Sunni, and they follow Abu Bakr. So in the Shia school of thought, you could be two kinds. You either are a mujtahid, you either are a learned, you're either the one decision maker, which is maybe 5,000, 10,000 of them all over the country. These are mullahs. And 98, 99% of the population are muqallid, or the follower. They have no brain or no decision making on their own. They have to follow whatever the mullahs and the first group would dictate. So it was in this kind of setting that the Tahirih was born. It was named Fatemeh. It was named Zarrin Taj. Zarrin Taj means golden hair. I think I have mentioned this before in one of my presentation. It seems, we are not sure, that as a child, Tahirih had the blonde hair. And it's possible because where she was born is close to a Turkish territory. And there are lots of Turks who have a blonde hair and even blue or green eyes. So it's possible that as a child, she had the blonde hair. So they call it golden hair, Zarrin Taj. And then later on, as we should discuss it later, she was also named Qurratul Ayn, the solace of the eye. These are the title and name that was given to this unique woman. I think she was in her early 20s that in her library of her cousin and her father, she came across some writing by a man by name Sheikh Ahmad Ahsa'i and Sayyid Kazim Rashdi. These are two figures that extensively in Dawnbreaker, you can read about them. And they've established this school of thought called Sheikhi. And Tahirih started to correspond with Sayyid Kazim. And even she wrote a very lengthy essay defending this new school of thought. And it was so impressive and so wonderful written that Sayyid Kazim, the leader of the group, referred to her as the Qurratul Ayn, the solace of my eyes. She was very anxious to meet this man. So she and her sister, and I think her daughter, but we are not sure, she left the household. There's a notion that some people object, and I can explain that to you later, that she dropped her children, her husband, the family, and she decided to pursue and go to Karbala to meet this man. And she should not have done that as a mother and as a wife. But then you have to realize that I'm 100% sure that she offered to take the children with her. But of course, her husband refused to allow her. And in that country, the education of children, especially the boys, is left to the husband. The mother has no control on that whatsoever. So she had no choice, either stay in Qazvin with that husband of hers, which was not quite nice person, or go and pursue her search and her for the promised one. That we'll talk about him later. When she came to Qazvin, when she left Qazvin, she went to Karbala. She found out the master is dead. This was the first opportunity that Tahirih got that openly start classes and lecture for the people. What happened, in the Karbala, she would replace the Sayyid Kazim, the head of the Sheikhi school, and she would sit behind the curtain, and hundreds of students, men and women, would sit in the other side, and she would lecture and talk about different concepts and different stories about the Islam. I'd like to add here something which I may forget later. She was a great poet herself, and she had the tendency of, as she was talking, she would recite and read lots of poetry, often by other people. And what happened is that toward the end, because she had this ability and potentiality to write poetry herself, she would add few lines to those original poem by some other people. And then she would end it up by mentioning her own name. This is a style of Persian poetry that at the end, the last two lines, somehow you mention yourself. Oh, Tahirih, you done whatever you had to do and time to leave it alone, something like this. So often there were lots of poetry that finish with her name, the last line, but it's not really her poetry. So they have done lots of research on that in the recently last 30, 40 years. And they discover which one are really her poetry and which one are the one that she borrowed and she just add few lines to it. I just want to make that clear to you. Her life in Karbala was quite interesting because soon, because of her teaching and educating the girls and the boys in that city, she got a large number of followers. And it was around that time that I may be repeating some information that you already have. You know that she had this dream of a young Sayyid, a young man, very good looking one, high above in the sky in a green turban and a black cloak, was reciting some lines, very similar, or she wrote them down at the time. So later on, when she found those lines that she had dreamed of in the writing of the Bab, it confirmed her belief, and she became absolutely confirmed a Babi. But how did she become Babi is not just through this dream. Her brother-in-law was one of the people who were searching also for the promised one. And she has told him, these were the group of people with Mullah Hussein, that they went and searched for the Qa'im, for the promised one. She told her brother-in-law that as you're traveling with Mullah Hussein, if you ever find the promised one, please convey to him my love and my obedience and my desire to follow him. And I'm sure he did. And that was the time that Bob accepted her as, I think, 17 letter of living. And she was the only woman who was part of that. Reading those lines in Bob's writing, as I mentioned, it confirmed her belief. She may not have openly, I want to clear this point. In 19th century Persia, or in America even, there was not that much discussion about the equality of man and woman. These are modern subjects that came about in perhaps 20th or 21st century. But her lifestyle and her belief in Bab and her love for Baha'u'llah, it all shows that she believed in this equality and she practiced equality. The way she led the classes, the way she unveiled herself in conference of Badash, the way she treated other women who were around her. There were a whole bunch of ladies, including Mullah Hussein's sister, who would accompany her all over the place. Wherever she was traveling, this woman and some men would go with her to protect her and to learn from her. She became extremely popular in later stage because of her poetry, that people like Iqbal, the great Indian poet, who actually some of you may have heard his name, who was a Nobel Prize winner for poetry and literature. Martha Root met with him in later date. He was one of his admirers. Edward Brown, the great Orientalist, British citizen, who wrote extensively about Tahirih and her contribution to the liberation of the woman. And I think he mentioned that the coming of a woman like Tahirih in that society, in that environment, was nothing but a miracle. So this was an unusual comment that Brown made. Lord Curzon, the General Counsel, or actually Governor General of India, wrote extensively about her. Of course, then later on, many books, I read someplace that more than thousands books and articles have been written about this woman. So I have a feeling that the amount of attention that Tahirih got because of her radical and revolutionary ideas got more attention by the Western press and Western scholars than even Bob himself. Definitely more than Baha'is got later. I think there were two occasions that the faith really got attention in the West. One was the declaration of the Bab, and acceptance of Tahirih, of his teaching. And the other one was coming of Abdul Baha to America. This was two occasions that really the Western press and others were quite excited about. This woman that at the age of 36 in the year 1852 eventually made the ultimate sacrifice. And as you know, they strangled her to death and with her own scarf, and they dump her in a well. And the rumor is, we are not sure if that really what she has said, that she has told the people who were killing him, you may kill me, but you cannot stop the progress and emancipation of the woman. No, we don't. Even one scholar, Western scholars, I think his name is, what's his name? I can't remember his name. He has mentioned that Tahirih made this claim, but we don't have any other sources to prove that this particular statement was made by him. How we relate this life of this woman to education and formation of a school in the Persia? Because of affection and the love that originally Babis and then later on Baha'is had for this woman, they were all, especially girls, they were all trying to imitate and follow her example. Many, many Persian girls, I know I see even in America, in Europe, they named their kids, their daughter Tahirih. So, and Tahirih was known to be educated, to be a poet, to be a writer. Actually, I'm familiar with her writing. Her writing is much more superior than her poetry. And they should have done more study on that subject. I hope some future scholar would do that. In her name, many schools opened for the girls in Persia in 20th century. I think the first Baha'i school that opened for the girls and boys was in year 1870. There was a fellow by name Mullah Ali and his wife Alevi Khanum that in the province of Mazandaran, they opened a school for the girls and for boys. And even though the mullahs and conservative element of the cities, they were against it, they survived those classes for almost 10 years until the year, I think, 1882. Eventually, they arrested Mullah Ali, they sent him to Tehran, and he was executed because he has opened a school and he was a Baha'i. The entire system of educational system in Iran, even though there were some liberal element in these views, I believe that was started by a group of dedicated and committed Baha'is because they wanted to fulfill one of the teachings of Baha'u'llah, that was training of the woman, when they have said that training of the woman is more important than training of the man. You know, the famous school for the boys, they call it Tarbiyat school, a school of good manner. For the boys, it started, I think, was in 1899, and for the girls, it started in 1911. These schools and many other schools around the country, they almost had more than 10% of the student population in Iran. Many of them named their school after Tahirih. And the subject of their study often was basic curriculum, very much familiar with European schools. Corporal punishment has stopped. The study of foreign language was encouraged, and reading Tahirih's poetry and Tahirih's story and other things was left on the side for the day, not the formal school, because they didn't want to get the government involved and close the school and become a religious school. I think at some point, almost 10% of the student population in Persia was attending the Baha'i schools. The American woman, that's why I mentioned when I see you ladies, I think about them. The American woman financially, personally made a tremendous sacrifice to improve this school. Dr. Susan Moody, I hope you have heard her name. Susan Moody was a doctor. She moved to Persia. She started a clinic to help the ladies to treat them, because They would not go to a man doctor. And then later on, she got involved in that tarbiyat school for the girls, and she was teaching them nursing and taking care of their health. There's another person, what was her name? Lillian Kappas was another one. And then there was Elizabeth Store was another one. And then one of the last one, which I met personally, and I loved her, was Mrs. Sharp. There was a wonderful American woman who came to Persia, I think, in 1940s, and then learned the language. In 1950s, Shoghi Effendi encouraged and allowed the woman to become a member of National Assembly. So she was elected to National Spiritual Assembly of Iran. She was running this tarbiyat school for a while for the girls, and she became a secretary of National Assembly of Iran for many years. So financially, the American community gave a great deal of money to this establishment of the school. The school was open in Hamadan, in Kashan, in Yazd, in Shiraz, in Isfahan, in Tehran. It was a wonderful, more than 50 schools open all over the country to educate the girls and educate the future mothers and all that. And actually, my own mother-in-law tell the story that she, as a child, a young girl, she went from her town Neiris, she went to Yazd, which is a bigger city, and they have already had a school for girls. And she finished the 6th grade elementary school, which was quite an accomplishment for the girls to finish the 6th grade. And when she came back to her own village, she became a big celebrity because then now she can teach the others. She had classes for them and things like this. This went on. The school was successful. Many prominent Iranians put their kids in high school. Even the Reza Shah, the king himself, for a while, had his children in the school. But this is the trouble happened. In 1934, let me tell you this. The country in 1934 was running by a new king called Reza Shah. Reza Shah originally was a military officer who had a coup d'etat, get rid of the Qajar dynasty, as I mentioned earlier, who they were, and established a new dynasty called Pahlavi dynasty. Reza Shah was a controlling type, and she wanted everything to be the way he wanted. Now, Shoghi Effendi has told the Baha'i community, and this is our belief, that we are obedient to the government on all circumstances. But when it comes to the certain religious principle, like having the faith, like taking the Baha'i holidays off, like attending to feasts and things like this cannot be controlled by the government. We have to go by our own conscience. So what happened in 1934 is the king of Persia had his office next to the boys' school, Tarbiyat. And he enjoyed very much every morning to listen to this loud chanting of prayer and singing the Baha'i song and all that. He got the really enjoyment out of this. One day he goes to his office and see everything's quiet. No praying, no singing. So he asked, what's going on? Oh, they told him today is a Baha'i holiday and the school is closed. He said, what? A school is closed without my permission? How do they allow they be in country and they close the school? He said, yes, it's all the Baha'i school throughout the country are closed today because of Baha'i holidays. The king got upset and he ordered, unless they open the school on every day, they are shut them down. And of course, they followed the Shoghi Effendi advice and they followed their conscience. And they said, no, we have to respect and obey taking the days off. And so they closed the school. So this was really the end of a major enterprise educational service for the country. And this was such a damage to the whole system. Later on, of course, the other schools was established, some by Baha'is, some by non-Baha'is, but it was not really as organized and as the fashion that I've been talking so far. Then you all know, of course, what happened in the recent revolution, 1979, with Ayatollah Khomeini came to power. The Baha'i children, boys, and especially girls for sure, they were completely deprived for any further education, for attending to university, attending to a school, and even though we have started some, what they call it, Baha'i kids who are learning things through the internet, and many American universities have recognized this long distance learning as a substantial way of learning, and they give them eventually a degree and recognize that. So I have collected some pictures and some drawing that I asked Jean to show them. So we're going to show those pictures, and then I'd be more than glad to answer any question that you folks may have. Thank you for listening. Okay, Jean, I'm ready for the picture. Tahirih with her sister and a mother, and this was maybe the beginning. This wonderful friend of mine, what's her name, Samina, in Romania, has done this painting for us, illustration. The man on the corner sitting there most likely is her father. Her father was very upset that Tahirih was a girl. I often would say, oh, how I wish that this girl was a boy. How little he knew that this girl is going to surpass thousands of the men in the future. Next.
Are they moving?
Yeah.
No, they're not. Now,
there we go. Okay.
I mentioned that Tahirih grew up in a very unusual Persian family. This is it's interesting, just a library in her father's house. There were hundreds of books there. Somewhere I read that they found out there were 4,000 books in her father's library, which is quite unusual for 19th century, 18th century time in a private home of anybody. But it shows that the background of this distinguished family was really inherited with the birth of Tahirih. Next. This, of course, Tahirih, I think she had, as I mentioned, she had 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. The girls, right soon after Tahirih was martyred, the girl died herself, and probably the idea was that she missed her mother so much that she could not continue living, or she did not live much longer. But the boys follow the example of their father, and they all became a leading mullahs and ayatollahs in Iran. One thing interesting, I should say, that the family of Tahirih, they tried as much as they could to distance themselves from her, because she was considered infidel, she was considered an anti-Islam figure, and so they tried to really erase her memory as much as they could. But then I read the Martha Ruth when she wrote that her book on Tahirih. There's a story that she was in Qazvin, and somehow she managed to go to the house of Tahirih, and then one of Tahirih's descendant relative owning that house, and then she begged this relative, please allow me to spend some time in Tahirih's room, private room. And the woman said, the person said, okay. And then Martha Ruth was in the room, and then she appeared, the landlord or the woman appeared, and she saw Martha Ruth is laying on the floor on her face down, and she is sobbing and crying. And later on, she told her other relative, we should all be ashamed of ourselves that this Western woman come all the way from Farang, from America, and is doing this kind of respect for Tahirih, and we are ignoring her. So this is in the book, you can read about. Next. This is again a picture of Tahirih teaching some ladies in Karbala. She got so much recognition and love by many people, particularly women, that she treated her as some kind of holy figure. What they would do sometime, which of course, we don't encourage that. The people, when they go shop for the food, before they take their food home, they would bring it to her present so she could gaze on the food. Like a kind of, in Jewish faith, you have a rabbi, kosher food. So but just by looking at the food, she would bless the food for them. So this was the kind of attention and love she got. So this is some of the women in Karbala who were attracted to her. Next. Again, same thing. I spent lots of time trying to train the women of the East to come out of their shells and try to manifest their power and their being. Next. It's not showing.
No, you're showing. Well,
oh,
okay.
This story is a cute story. You have read in Dawnbreaker, I think Abdul Baha has mentioned this, that there was occasion that Abdul Baha was sitting on the lap of Tahirih. It was probably, she was doing some babysitting, and then Wahid, it's supposed to be Wahid, the great peerless Wahid, was present in Baha'u'llah's house, and Wahid was lecturing and talking, at very eloquent presentation, and Tahirih got impatient and started to yell at him that the time for talk and for eulogy and this and that is over. Go and do something with your life. Can you imagine talking to Wahid like this, the greatest learned man in Persia, how ghastly Tahirih was? And so this Wahid and Tahirih is behind the curtain and lecturing. Next. This is interesting. This is the handwriting of Tahirih. There is a whole number of pieces of her handwriting which exist. They're absolutely beautiful, and it's quite a deep writing of hers. That there's a two type of writing. One is that the one that she openly teach some of the teaching about and elaborate on. The other one, there were a bunch of people who were against her and against Babi faith. There were sheikhs who never became Babi. And there's a whole bunch of her writing which is respond to their objection and their attack, and is a counterattack really. And sometimes refer to them as a, I don't know, all kind of dead flies or something. Next. This is the beginning of a bunch of pictures of the American woman who their contribution. Tatiana, could you move back? This was Susan Moody, the doctor I mentioned, that she went there and she contributed so much to the welfare of the women of Persia and the Baha'is and non-Baha'is. She was a doctor, she was an educator, and I think later on we may have a picture of her funeral. It was attended by thousands of people. And it was quite unusual for a woman to die and this kind of attention be given to them by all these wonderful men who were very much in love with her. Next. Is this, who's that? Oh, that's the woman I want to talk about?
Yeah, the one that came to America.
Yeah. This, next to Susan Moody is an interesting girl, which lately there's been lots of attention given to her, Qudsiye Ashraf. She came to America, I think in 1911. Somehow she came to go to university. She was one of the, maybe not one, the first Persian girl who came to West to study. She attended Columbia University. She studied nursing and teaching. She was in teacher's college at Columbia. On the ship that she was coming to America, by coincidence, also Louis Gregory was on the same ship. So Louis Gregory was a big help to her. She came, and then her whole life, she met Abdul Baha when Abdul Baha was in Chicago to live the cornerstone of the temple. There was occasion that she went to White House and meet the president as a part of maybe Persian delegation or some student or something. She went back to Iran. She spent quite some time, worked for the Baha'i School for the girls. Then she went to Palestine. She helped the Arabs. Then she went to South America for 4 or 5 years. She was doing studying nursing and training girls to become nurse. She came back to Iran. She was an unbelievable woman. So they refer to her as really the founder of socio-economic projects in Persia, because what she did all over the country, especially opening up nursing schools and things like this for the girls. And this is an interesting picture of her and Dr. Susan Moody. Next. Okay, this is Dr. Moody with the, imagine with all this men around him. Yes, it's very unusual. Next. Oh, the one at the center is one of my favorite character, and he was my own teacher, Mr. Furutan, who later on became hand of the cause. He was, for a while, he was the administrator and director of a Tarbiyat school in Tehran. And I think she was the first trained administrator, because he studied in Moscow University, education administration, education psychology. Next. Look at all this. This is beautiful. These are all the girls who attended girls' school in Tehran. These were the first group probably that they get the chance to get some education. God bless them.
Mention some of the subjects that they were.
Oh, it's interesting that the subject that they were teaching these girls was physical education. It was unbelievable that, teaching girls in Iran physical education. They were teaching them foreign languages, particularly French, because French influence was wonderful. They were teaching them also because they knew lots of them or all of them eventually going to be a mother and wife, and they would teach them in the school sewing. So they would train them that. They would train them some citizenship and good manner and how to be a good wife and things like this. The trouble before this kind of school opened, these idiots in that country, they thought if the girls get too much education, she could not be a good wife, and she would not give as much attention and respect and love to her husband. First of all, she may not find a husband because she's educated. Second, even after she married, she would not be a good wife. But little they knew that this education would make them a much better mother and much better wife that they can imagine. Next picture. Next. I think they're going to stop.
One moment.
Oh, this is amazing. Look at this. Look at this. This is wonderful. These are all very unique pictures. And it's amazing. I showed this picture to, when I told you I made a presentation to the Parliament of World Religion. And the reaction they were quite impressed by a contribution of American women to educational system in Persia. Actually, I did some research in the New York City Baha'i Assembly archive, and because I was writing a short book about the history of the Baha'i faith in New York City for the last 70, 80 years. And I came across some indication that New York Assembly sent, I think, some money to support maybe 10, 15 students financially in this girls and boys school. Or I should also mention that some of the students of this school, they become leading scholars in the world, in the country. A fellow by name Ehsan Yarshater was a student. An Orientalist that ever has lived. That he's the founder of the organizer of Iranian Encyclopedia. That is a major work. So then Seyhun, and then Rasekh, and a number of others. These are all the students of this Tarbiyat school that later on helped the country to move forward and progress. Shame on them that they stop all this. Next. Again, are there girls, Tatiana?
Yeah.
These are more girls on the younger age. They would start the school with a younger group on elementary level. Then as they get older, they would add classes, and eventually they would go all the way to finishing the high school. And they were mostly following, I think, European style of school, which is different from America. It's a little more, what they call it, more subject that they cover. Next. More picture. This must be the high school kids. Yeah. Next.
You want the next one?
Go to the next one. Yeah.
Okay. Whoops. What are you seeing right now?
It's not moving.
Okay, hang on.
That's good.
That's fine.
That what you want?
fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the right one. Yeah.
Okay.
If you get the chance, save your money and buy this book. It was written by wonderful scholars and a writer by the name Baha'i Nakhjavani. Is a daughter of Ali Nakhjavani. It's really a novel about Tahirih. And it's, as the title said, the woman who read too much. Originally, it was written in French language, became a bestseller in France, and then was translated by some people at Stanford University, and is available in English. It's a wonderful book. That is really, I recommend that. Next.
Did that move?
No.
Okay,
Okay.
hang on.
Yeah, this.
No, it's
Okay.
not. And if you have some extra money and you feel like reading some more, this is the book that Harry Chapman and myself put together on the life of Tahirih, and we're trying to compare the station of the woman in the East and the West, and who were the American contemporary women who lived at the same time, and what was their contribution. It's called The Calling. Well, this basically take care of the slides I had. Now, Jean is going to open it for any question that you may have.
Questions, discussion? Everybody can unmute if they want to speak.
How wonderful to see some of those slides and pictures that we haven't seen before. Thank you for sharing those.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I have a question. Are any of these women, Tahirih, Dr. Moody, or the others you talked about, mentioned or given credit in Iranians' history today? Or are they completely wiped out of history in that country?
Yeah, they tried, as I mentioned, they tried to erase her name and not to, but thanks to Baha'i scholars and Baha'i writers, they maintain long enough her name and her work that then eventually the non-Baha'i historian and writer wake up and they realize her contributions. So for last 20, 30, 40 years, often when they talk about the literary woman of Persia or contribution of woman to Iranian culture, they do bring her name up and they mention her poetry and they mention her story and her life. So that's a new phenomenon.
Thank you.
Sure, welcome.
Someone else had a question.
Gloria.
Yeah.
Oh, I just was wondering if the slides that you had shown today, are they in your book, or
No.
are they private slides?
No, they are not private slides. You have to do a little bit of search. You can find some of them on the Google images. If you maybe enter education of the girls in Iran, you may find some of them. But you have to do it. Or maybe you can type up Tarbiyat School. That's the name.
Yeah.
Tarbiyat School for girls. It may even show. So it's available. No, it's not my book. My book mostly deal with Tahir's life in earlier days, and I picked up a whole bunch of American women that I mentioned their story. That's amazing that not many people have seen that the whole Shakers movement was started by women. The whole Christian Science Church started by women.
Right.
Adventist was started by women. A bunch of other schools, of religious schools. You know, the whole idea to allow the woman to preach. This was a big thing. You know, if you read it, the first awakening and second awakening that took place in America was all about allowing women to preach. And then later on, of course, it moved to getting the right to vote and talk about equality and all that. But it basically was a church phenomenon, very much the same as Tahirih was not necessarily any figure that you would find him in a social life of Persia. You find him in a religious area, debating and consulting and working with the mullahs and other elements. And then later on, of course, you would find out that her contribution to the welfare of society as a whole.
Other questions? I have a question, but I want to find out if others have questions first.
Oh, did you have a short poem of Tahirih to share?
Why not? Let's see now if I can find. I have one favorite one. Where is that book?
That's a lovely idea, Mona.
I like that, but I can find the book.
I know Yash here loves to read poetry, so I really wanted her to hear some of that.
About her poetry.
I don't see it.
As I remember, poetry was one of my grandmother's and my mother's favorites to read.
You can read it here.
Where is that? Face to face.
They used to teach it. They don't teach it anymore.
Well, they were both teachers and early educators from the 1800s and 1900s.
Yeah.
By Amin Banani?
Point by point, right?
Yeah, let me see. Proud of you.
But you have to enlarge it.
This is one of my favorite poems that was translated by Amin Banani and Joshua Kessler at University of California. And it's famous, it's called Point by Point. I did it to you. If I meet you face to face, I would retrace, erase my heartbreak, pain by pain, ache by ache, word by word, point by point. In search of you, just your face, I roam through the street, lost in disgrace, house to house, lane to lane, place to place, door to door. My heart hopeless, broken, crushed, I heard it pound till blood gushed from fountain of fountain, stream by stream, river by river, sea by sea. The garden of your lips, your cheeks, your perfume hair, I wandered there, bloom to bloom, rose to rose, petal to petal, scent to scent. Your eyebrow, your eye, and the mole on your face, somehow they tie me, trait to trait, kindness to kindness, passion to passion, love to love. While I grieve with love, your love, I will reweave the fabric of my soul, stitch by stitch, thread by thread, wrap by wrap, woof by woof. Last, I, Tahirih, search my heart and I look line by line. What did I find? You and you, you and you, you and you. Isn't that beautiful?
Beautiful. Thank you.
You mentioned there is a website called tahirathepureone.com, organized by the same team who work on the book, and all the poems are there, including more reading performances, and you will really enjoy it. tahirathepureone.com.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd like to know how you got that handwriting sample.
There was a wonderful scholar by the name Fazl Mazandarani. Fazl lived a long life, and actually he even came during Abdul Baha's time to America, and he stayed here for a couple of years teaching, and then he lived during the Shoghi Effendi's time. And this man had this amazing talent that throughout his traveling, wherever he goes, he would try to collect and dig as much material, historical paper and stuff as he could. And it's amazing. He has written 9 volumes of the book about the early history of the faith, Baha'i dispensation. And I think the volume 3 or volume 5, it contained pretty much the whole story of Tahirih and her family and her work. This handwriting of Tahirih's picture is from those collections. God bless his soul. And actually, in one of the tablets that somebody discovered from Abdul Baha to him, he referred to him, Abdul Baha referred to him as a hand of a cause. But of course, since Shoghi Effendi has never officially declared him as a hand of a cause, we think that this is just a wonderful admiration that Abdul Baha had for him. But it's unbelievable. His name is Fazl Mazandarani. And that's where I found it, is her handwriting.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other
God bless
questions?
America.
Any other questions, discussion? Welcome, Lakatas.
I didn't late. I caught the end of the slides. No, this is great.
Well, yeah,
Thanks.
that's, thanks for coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
They helped us spread the word on this too. Jimmy and Tony and Steve, Juliana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I spread the word for it. Yeah.
Thank you. We always appreciate your support. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions that people have for Dr. ID?
I have a question there. I have to, pardon me, Dr. Adier, is that how you pronounce?
Adier, yes.
Adier.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, because I missed the beginning of the talk, but this is a subject that I bring up when I talk about the importance of education for girls, is how did the early schools in the, late 1800s, how did they get started, and what is the point at which they reached a critical mass such that they looked like they were going to last? long-term, even if there's short-term opposition? I mean, was it that well-known Persian gentlemen were sending their kids to these schools? Did that provide a certain amount of credibility? Because my impression was that certainly in the 1800s, maybe the 1900s, Persia was a very segregated society. You know, the Jews didn't interact with the Christians didn't interact much with others. Maybe that's just my perception, but to create a school and make it available to everyone, for girls especially, what did it take for them to gain credibility and not be continuously shut down?
What happened in the early 19th century, 1909, there was a major revolution took place in Iran. They call it constitutional revolution.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They got rid of the old dynasty, Qajar dynasty, and there's a whole group of liberal and open-minded Persian and good number of Baha'is who were involved with that. They began to introduce some of these modern ideas, not just in education, but in medicine, in finance, in military, in foreign policy, and all that. And Abdul Baha played a major role in that area, encouraging the Baha'is to put some of their teaching as far as the education of the girls concerned to practice. They encourage American community and European community to help them financially, to send them teachers and things like this. So it started very small. Often in someone's house, it would start with 10, 15 neighborhood kids and all that. And then later on, when they become brave enough, they would rent or buy a hall or start a school. In majority of cases, establishing this school was opposed by mullahs and religious leaders for a simple reason, because historically, this was a big source of income for them, because they were the one who were conducting the classes and lectures and things like this. And by having a school that some professional a teacher would take care of them, would deprive them from substantial amount of income. So they would issue these edicts or fatwas, condemning the schools. And they actually, many occasions, they would say the teaching of the girls is against the Islamic tradition, Islamic principle. And in a number of places, they burned the school down. In a number of places, they forced the school to be closed. So this was an ongoing struggle. But because there were enough open-minded Iranian and enough parents who they realized the value of this school, even though they may burn one building and then a year later they open another school in Hamadan, for example. And one thing I also want to give credit here to the Jewish community. You know, many Jews became Baha'i in Hamadan and Kashan. And then in these two cities, they started some big time schools for the Jewish Baha'i kids and non-Jewish Baha'i kids. And then they support them financially. The school in Tehran was taught by a number of Jewish scholars, Baha'i scholars. So it was a combination of doing the right thing at the right time. The country was going through changes. They were trying to open up to modern technology and modern ideology. At the same time, Baha'is, they wanted to be in the forefront of some of this movement. That's how it happened.
Yeah, I'm just thinking I'm like I said, I'm sorry I missed the very beginning of the talk, but I mean, the actual forming of the earlier schools, weren't we talking 1860s, 1870s?
1872. The first one.
So that's a long way from 1872 to 1909.
Exactly, yeah. Actually, as I mentioned, the founder of that first Baha'i school, after 12 years of running the school, was arrested in Rasht, in Mazandaran, and he was sent to Tehran, and he was put to death for opening the school and teaching the girls and boys the new subject. These mullahs, historically, they were against any new movement to start with. And of course, to start with, they were against the Babi and Baha'i faith because the thrust of their ideology and their teaching is that they represent the absent Qa'im. They represent the promised one. And in his absence, they are allowed to collect money, to run the mosque, to run the school, to do all kind of things. All of a sudden, somebody come by the name of Bab, and later on Baha'u'llah, he said, no, the show is over. The promised one is here. You don't have to go through any mullah or any of you to reach God and reach the teaching. You can pray to God and this and that. So it was a financial trauma for them. And that eventually led to more opposition. And this was also applied to the school system because you just take their jobs away from them.
Yeah, I'm sorry to prolong, but my sons in their college classes had opportunities to tell a little bit about the history of the faith in some of their history courses and philosophy courses. And I'm glad you mentioned about the Jewish connection to maintaining the momentum for children's and girls' schools, because doing some research, it turns out that right around the time Baha'u'llah was actually sent to Akka, coincided with a very large, even I think the word mass conversion almost in the certain parts of Iran from the Jewish community embracing the Baha'i faith. And the historians make out this point that unlike all other attempts at persuading Jews about a new religion, this seemed to have with Baha'u'llah, his background being from the Persian, going back to the ancient Persian kings, and the allowing Israelites to go back to Israel. They claimed, or at least the Baha'i teachers presented the role that this was part of their future, as if this is some great grandpa, helping them the way the early Persian kings did. But there was a very large amount of Jewish people that embraced the Baha'i faith.
That's true. That's very
and
true.
And it's something that when we did this research about links between Israel, the United States, and Persia, there's this confluence in which the Jewish faith seems to make appearances.
That's true.
Yeah.
Actually, for many years, I was wondering why a typical Iranian Jew become Baha'i. I mean, they were already oppressed.
That was the whole point of the argument. Yeah. Why ask for more trouble?
They were destroyed. They burned their houses. They live in the ghetto. And if you really want to change of religion, why don't you become Muslim? At least you get it over. You don't have any more suffering to go. But it must be some really religious attraction or some miracle.
So spiritual
things that attract these people, that they are willing to double jeopardy. That first they are Jewish and know they become Baha'i, and then on top of it, some woman. Can you imagine be a woman, a Jew, and a Baha'i? Forget it. You really would get it in that country. But they did it. So this is the power of the faith. That's the only way I can look at it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Anyone else? Questions? Gloria.
Just so I get it right, the Tabiat School was founded in 1872. Was that correct?
No, Tabiat School for the boys was founded in 1899.
Oh, 1899.
For the boys. The 1872 was a small Baha'i school that started in Mazan, province of Mazandaran, by a fellow by name Mullah Ali and his wife Aleviya Khanam. And then I think the Tarbiyat school for the girls started in 1911.
Okay. I was just trying to get the dates straight.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine.
And I probably won't remember them. Even though I wrote them down, I probably won't remember them when I need recall.
Don't worry about it, Gloria. I had to be reminded that it was Saturday.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
And
Actually,
welcome
I have
to
a
the
sto-
people who just
I have a
joined us
story.
as
I
well.
have a story for you. This man met his friend and he noticed he kept calling his wife honey, sweetheart, darling, baby, all kind of this wonderful name. So he told his friend, I'm so impressed by you that after all these years of marriage, you call your wife all this beautiful name. He said, shh, I forgot what her name is.
I love it. I love it.
All right. Anything else before we close this wonderful program?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for arranging it, Jean, and for our guest speaker. Very, very thank you.
Thank you.
Big thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you, Dr. Atiye. Thank you, Jean, Kelly.
Very welcome.
It is always
VRBI.org.
such a wonderful pleasure to listen to Hussein, and I have been able to attend, I think this is the third session, I think I've been able to attend.
Yes, this is the third time, yeah.
And I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with us at Desert Rose, and we appreciate your stories and the heart with which you share your experiences and your learnings. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you again soon.
Right.
Believe me, it was my pleasure. Thank you, dear.
Every time he writes a book, he sends me a note and he says, oh, by the way.
That's right.
And
No,
it's about every 6 months, pretty regularly too, you know.
at my old age, there's not much else I can do but just to write. You know, so.
So we will be looking forward to your the next installment.
Actually,
That's right.
And
we could do a launch.
Tatiana is helping me to set up an app application that often we believe that people that go to Haifa for pilgrimage, it's good if they have some system to write their reflection, to take some pictures, yes, to share some information. So we're setting up, we are starting this application that, you know, on your iPhone, while you're in Haifa over there, you can take all the picture and send it to your friends and relatives. You can quickly write your reaction to what you see and what you do. So this is our next project.
Oh,
that
wonderful.
That was one of the things that Mrs. Sears, if you went with Mrs. Sears or you're planning a pilgrimage, she was emphatic about having a book about the holy places and a notebook to write your memoirs in.
Exactly. So this notebook is thanks to Tatiana and her son there. They are more technically advanced than me. We have this note and we can all do all this thing on your iPhone. Take as many pictures as you want, send it as a PDF to friends and send it, collect information, all that. So it's going to be free and will be available soon. So enjoy that if you go to Haifa.
Please let us know when it's available so that we can spread the word about it.
I will do that. Sure.
Yeah.
I show my age by saying the last time I went on pilgrimage, I created a scrapbook.
It is the modern version of a scrapbook. Yeah.
I think I heard you say during your talk, I think it slipped him when, I don't know whether it was Tahirih said it or you said it. I thought it was so important, not just the importance of educating women equally as boys, but more important, to educate women better than boys.
Very true.
And I like that. And I will take that away from this talk because believe me,
I give you an example.
I think it's so important.
My in-laws, I married this wonderful woman. Actually, her name is Tyra. They had 6 children. And so they had the chance of either, I think their son and their daughter both were admitted to medical school in Shiraz, but they could only afford to send one of them to medical school. And it's amazing they decided to send their girls to medical school. And by luck, I married her. So as soon as I
Wait,
married her.
you married Tahirih?
Yeah. So I married her. And as soon as I married her, because she was a doctor, I said, no, I can retire.
Nice.
Oh, wonderful.
Hossein is my sister. Thank you, Hossein. Thanks a lot. It was wonderful.
I'm glad you like it.
It was a good subject.
Have a good
Aloha,
night.
Pa, dear
Aloha,
friends.
everyone.
Okay,
Love all of you.
thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. We will have you back soon.
Sure, dear. No problem.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you.
You're
Thanks,
very
Jean.
welcome. You're very welcome.
Are you in New York or in Atlanta?
I'm in New York.
Oh, okay.
I commute between New York and Atlanta. You know,
I know.
my work is here. So
Okay.
Khada Hafiz.
Khula Hafiz.
Bye.